Speaker, does the Minister agree that Scottish agriculture, salmon and distilleries like Lockleigh in my constituency will benefit from our 3 trade deals? But can she work out why the SNP failed to support them?
Mr Speaker, those 3 trade deals are, of course, some of the proudest achievements of this Labour government, and they will disproportionately benefit Scotland because it is, as I have already said, home to some of the finest produce on the face of the earth, and we are delighted to be promoting it as part of the Scotland Office's Grand Scotland efforts.
Mr Speaker, does my honourable friend agree it is the Chancellor's excellent spending review for Scotland, setting out record funding for the Scottish Government, which means SNP ministers are ideally placed to offer the agricultural sector in Scotland a multi-year funding settlement, and that's exactly what they should now do.
Mr Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend that the Scottish Government has been blessed with a record settlement in the devolution era. The difficulty for those of us on this side of the House that championed that settlement is that we are all too well aware that I'm afraid the Scottish Government is absolutely addicted to wasting money, which is why the only route for Scotland to have a new direction is to replace a failing Scottish Government with a Labour one in May.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, this weekend I was at the Fettercairn show in my constituency, and I noted that 2 weeks ago the Secretary of State was at the Royal Highland Show in Edinburgh. Now, with new research showing that more than 16,000 jobs are expected to be lost as a direct result of Labour's family farm tax, can I ask the Secretary of State and the Minister what their message to farmers that they met at the Royal Highland Show was regarding their government plans to kill family farms in Scotland? Because judging by the comments made this weekend, to me, the fear, anger and disgust at how this government has treated the agricultural sector and rural Scotland very much remains.
Mr Speaker, our message to the farming community, including NFUS Scotland, with whom I meet regularly, and indeed to whom I spoke at their annual conference earlier, was there has to be fairness in the government's approach to the public finances. The latest figures from 2021 to 22 show that 40% of the value of APR went to just 7% of claimants. That is neither fair nor sustainable.
To Luke Evans.
Number 6, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, the ruling brings clarity and confidence for women and service providers such as hospitals, refugees and sports clubs. Single-sex spaces are protected by law under Labour's Equality Act 2010 and will always be protected by this government, alongside the rights of the trans community, as was stated by the Supreme Court.
Luke Evans.
Mr Speaker, Joe Griffin, the Permanent Secretary of the Scottish Government, in appearing in front of the Hollywood Finance Public Administration Committee, was asked about action taken relating to the Supreme Court judgment. When pushed, he said, specific actions, I can't give you that right now. So does the UK Government believe that the Scottish Government is failing to uphold the law?
Mr Speaker, the application of the Supreme Court ruling to services in Scotland is a matter, of course, for the Scottish Government. It's for the Scottish Government to ensure they fully comply with the law as it stands.
Imogen Walker.
Mr Speaker, the Supreme Court judgment provided very welcome legal clarity on the matter of biological sex. But the Scottish Government has met clarity with chaos. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the SNP has made an absolute mess of this in much the same way that they have made a mess of passing on the biggest settlement in the history of devolution to Scottish NHS, education and housing services? And isn't it time they got a grip?
Mr Speaker, I think the F word could be used in terms of whatever the Scottish Government has done, and that is the word failure. And when it comes to the elections in May 2026 next year, the Scottish public will have to decide whether or not they require a third decade of the SNP Scottish Government or a change with an Anas Sarwar as First Minister.
Jerome Mayor.
Number 7, sir.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, under this government is working people in Scotland who will feel the benefit of economic growth. We've given the largest settlement in the history of the Scottish Government, £14 billion extra. The stability in the economy has enabled us to have 4 interest rate cuts, meaning cheaper mortgages for homeowners. Fuel duty is frozen, meaning 3 million Scots motorists pay less at the pump. The minimum wage is up, meaning a pay rise for 200,000 of the lowest paid Scots. In and that deserves the largest cheer because it is for the lowest paid Scots, and the Warm Homes discount is extended to 500,000 Scots.
Jerome Mayo.
The jobs tax decimated business confidence and has seen unemployment rise. The budget blow to Scotch whisky, the attack on family farms, the undermining of the oil and gas industry, and now Scottish Hospitality Group has slated the spending review, saying it does absolutely nothing to support the sector. So will he work with the Chancellor to undo the damage of her budget and her spending review that they've inflicted on family farms, Scotch whisky, oil and gas industry, hospitality, entertainment and business confidence in Scotland?
Mr Speaker, the honourable gentleman should go and speak to Scottish businesses and apologise for voting against the budget and apologise for voting against the £14 billion extra that will go to Scotland as part of the spending review. As a result of the decisions taken by this government, we had the highest growth in the G7, the highest business confidence in a decade, record inward investment, 3 major trade deals, 4 interest rate cuts, all helping businesses right across the country.
Joanna Baxter.
Mr Speaker, it's fantastic news that Ferguson Marine has secured this contract with BAE Systems to help further enhance the UK's maritime capability and making use of the skilled workforce there. Does my right honourable friend agree that this is in sharp contrast to the student union politics played by the SNP government in relation to defence? And does the Minister agree with me that the benefits of the spending review cannot be fully assessed until the SNP are removed from power in 2026?
Mr Speaker, yet again I agree with my right honourable friend, and can I pay a special tribute to both her and my honourable friend, the member for Inverclyde and Renfrewshire West, who've done so much to make sure we can get work into Ferguson Marine. But again, Mr Speaker, it won't be lost on the House, or indeed the Scottish public, that it's the defence industry that's supporting jobs in Scotland's defence industry, and that is straight into Ferguson Marine. Whereas the Scottish Government walks past on the other side, we will invest, Mr Speaker.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Durham Pape.
Question number 1, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you, Mr Speaker. On Monday, we marked the 20th anniversary of the despicable terrorist attacks on 7/7. The painful memories of that dark day are deeply ingrained. 52 people were murdered, many more were injured. We thank our emergency services who ran towards danger with true bravery, and send our deepest condolences to the victims, the survivors and bereaved, and all those forever affected by that appalling day. May I also extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Lord Tebbit. We remember his profound courage in the face of terrorism and a fierce devotion to his wife, Margaret. May he rest in peace. Mr Speaker, we also mark the 30th anniversary of the genocide at Srebrenica. We remember those lost and redouble our efforts to fight hatred and intolerance wherever it exists. Mr Speaker, I'm delighted to welcome President Macron to the United Kingdom. Our relationship has never been stronger, and we're focused on tough new tactics to tackle illegal migration, major economic investment to create jobs, and leading our allies to support Ukraine. Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks? At a recent coffee morning, residents in Southampton Itchen told me how much they still miss the Bitton NHS walk-in centre that was shut down a decade ago under the Conservatives. So can I begin by welcoming this government's 10-year plan and its commitment to neighbourhood health services. And as we put this plan for change into action for my local residents, does the Prime Minister agree that Bitton is an excellent location for the first new neighbourhood health centre?
Well, I pay tribute to him for making the case for his constituents, and I know the Health Secretary will give it every consideration. Mr Speaker, the 10-year plan will establish neighbourhood health centres in every community, and they'll make a massive difference, starting in the places where the need is greatest and life expectancy at its lowest. Mr Speaker, I'm proud that we promised 2 million extra NHS appointments in the first year of a Labour government, and we've now delivered £4 million. we shouldn't forget that the record investment that made that possible in the budget was opposed by all the parties opposite.
Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, can I echo the Prime Minister's sentiments about the horrific terrorist attack of July the 7th? I was pleased to be at the commemoration service on Monday, and in particular, our thoughts are with the families of those who lost their lives, those who had to go on without their loved ones. And, Mr. Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to Lord Tebbit, who died yesterday at the age of 94. He was a man of iron integrity and conviction, who by his efforts helped to save our country from the chaos of the 1970s. We all owe him so much. Mr. Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance, and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, it is rare. It is rare, yes. It is rare that he's able to give a clear answer, but I'm glad that he has done so, because he also promised, in fact, he boasted that he solved the doctor strike. But only a Prime Minister who was so weak and giving 28% pay rise to doctors, only now we see that they're still voting to strike again. He folds in every negotiation and claims that it is a triumph. Yes, he does. And we saw at the budget, Mr. Speaker, more promises. The Chancellor promised that she would lift the freeze on income tax and national insurance thresholds, because in her words, they hurt working people. Is that still government policy?
Mr. Speaker, no Prime Minister or Chancellor is going to write a budget in advance. We are absolutely fixed on our fiscal rules. We remain committed to them. We remain committed to our budget, to our manifesto commitments. I realise that sticking to your fiscal rules and your manifesto commitments is a bit unfamiliar to the party opposite, but it's because of the decisions the Chancellor took, that this government has taken, that we can update the House. £120 billion of inward investment into this country since we took office. Business confidence at a 9-year high. That's longer than the Leader of Opposition has been in Parliament. Deloitte this week saying the UK is now the best place to invest, creating 384,000 jobs. What a contrast to the mess that we inherited from the party opposite.
Mr. Speaker, there is no clear answer there. The whole House would have heard him fail to rule out freezing tax thresholds. He could say it in the first question, he could promise, but he couldn't this time round. But what does this mean, Mr. Speaker? He's talking about record investment and more jobs. We know that people are losing their jobs. Unemployment has gone up under Labour every single month since it's their year in office. But what does it mean on this issue of tax thresholds? It means that under Labour, millions of our poorest pensioners face being dragged into income tax for the first time ever. Does the Prime Minister think it is right that struggling pensioners should face a retirement tax?
Mr. Speaker, for a Prime Minister or Chancellor to say we're not going to write a budget in advance isn't a Labour thing or a Tory thing. Every single Prime Minister and Chancellor says they won't. We will stick to our manifesto commitments. We will stick to our fiscal rules. This is a language they don't understand, which is why I have to... That's what got us into the problem in the first place. And while she comes here every week to talk the country down, that investment, record investment, £120 billion, that will be good, well-paid jobs across the country. And this investment, Mr. Speaker, is foreign investors who can choose whether to invest in this country. They're choosing to invest in this country now because they have confidence in what this government is doing.
Mr. Speaker, investors are fleeing the country. They're fleeing the country. He says he sticks to his manifesto promises. They promised not to put a tax on working people, and then we got the jobs tax. And all we have seen is jobs disappearing. Before the election, the Prime Minister promised, and I quote, "not a penny more on your council tax." The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that now council tax bills will rise at their fastest rate in 20 years. Will the Prime Minister admit that under him council tax is set to soar?
Minister.
No, of course it's not. It's soared under the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, here she goes again, back on familiar territory. She comes here complaining about the national insurance rise every year, every week. She comes here complaining about it. And then when she's asked the question, well, would you have the courage then to reverse it? What's the answer? What's the answer? No! And I'll tell you for why. Because she's too embarrassed to say she doesn't want the investment we put in. That investment went to the NHS. They want the investment, they can't say how they're going to pay for it. That is what got us into the problem in the first place.
Mr. Speaker, he still doesn't understand, so I'm going to make it very simple for him. This is a mess of his own making. He shouldn't be asking how we would clean it up. The fact is, they raise national insurance through the jobs tax, and that's why they have to put up council tax. The truth is, his catastrophic budget has created a domino effect which he cannot now control. We on this side of the House know that you cannot tax your way to growth. But now he's flirting. They're all muttering. I remember that budget. They were laughing and cheering. They had no idea the mess that they were creating. They should go and explain to their constituents about why unemployment is going up. But, Mr. Speaker, what is more worrying is that now he's flirting with Neil Kinnock's demand for a wealth tax. Let's be honest about what that means. This is a tax on all of our constituent savings, on their houses, on their pensions. It would be a tax on aspiration. Will the Prime Minister rule this out?
Mr. Speaker says we shouldn't be asking them for advice on the economy. She's absolutely right about that. We will not be asking for their advice. What we did in the budget was stabilise the economy through the measures taken by the Chancellor. And what has that led to? 4 interest rate cuts. For mortgage holders, that's hugely important. Compare and contrast what happened to the Liz Truss mini-budget. The fastest growth in the G7 in the first quarter of this year. Wages up more in the first 10 months of a Labour government than the 10 years under the Tories. So, no, we don't need lessons from them.
Mr. Speaker, he says he stabilised the economy. Has he spoken to any farmers recently? Yes. It is time for him to take responsibility for the mess he is making. He has been in office for a year, and all we see is him congratulating himself on what a fantastic job that he has done. Nobody out there believes it. No, not even them. Not even them. What a weak chair. Mr. Speaker, he's congratulating himself. We can compare records. He talks about the fastest growing economy. We left him the fastest growing economy of the G7. We cut the deficit in every year until the pandemic. We got inflation down to 2%. On his watch, taxes are up. Unemployment is up. Inflation is up. And this weak Prime Minister has been forced into a series of chaotic U-turns. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the OBR said that our economy is being eroded under Labour. Doctor strikes, tax bombshells, the wealthy leaving in droves. Isn't the truth that under him he is dragging us back to the 1970s?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, responsibility. We're responsible for 4 million extra appointments in the NHS. We're responsible for a 10-year plan on the future of the NHS after they broke it. We're also responsible for free school meals being rolled out in a way which has never been done by any government. Breakfast clubs being rolled out, family hubs being rolled out, transport across the country, and migration coming down. We take responsibility and we're proud of that.
Lloyd Hatton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Eden project in Cornwall is a proven success story, injecting millions into the local economy. And in Lancashire, Eden Morecambe will soon be under construction, set to create hundreds of jobs. So it's about time we had the third instalment with Memo Portland, or Eden Portland, as many like to call it. This will be a world-class attraction, celebrating the Jurassic Coast and transforming the economy in South Dorset. So will the Prime Minister back this exciting project and work with me and all of the relevant ministers to secure funding to deliver this project? And ideally, can we use the new Growth Mission Fund?
Well, look, I thank him for highlighting this exciting proposal, and he's a fantastic advocate for Portland and South Dorset. The Eden Portland is a hugely exciting project. I can't confirm funding allocations yet, Mr. Speaker, but our £240 million Growth Mission Fund should support transformative projects that give local leaders real investment to deliver real change. And I know he makes a compelling case in relation to the fund that's been set out.
Sir Ed David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself and my party with the Prime Minister's comments about the horrifying terrorist bombings of 7/7 here in London? Our thoughts are with the victims, their families, and our amazing emergency services. And can I also join in the condolences to the family of Lord Tebbit? He was a man of service in the RAF, in politics, and as a carer for his wife, Margaret. He will be greatly missed. Mr. Speaker, after years of Conservative neglect, the special education needs system is in desperate need of repairs. But with parents understandably worried, we already hear Labour MPs planning another rebellion. So can I offer the Prime Minister this? If he genuinely wants to fix the problem and not strip away the rights of children and parents in some cost-cutting exercise, then we have 72 votes to help. So, will the Prime Minister look at the 5 tests for SEND reform we have published today and work with us to make it happen?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's telling that when he raises the question of the broken SEND system, they laugh at the back of the Tory boxes. They laugh. That's how seriously they take their responsibility. Absolute shame. But as he knows, every week across the House, people raise this issue with me. I think it's been raised more times than anything else. And everyone knows the system is broken. And again, guess who broke it along with everything else? It doesn't work for parents, and it lets down children. So we do need to reform and change it. That's not about saving money. We've already invested an additional £1 billion into SEND, but it is about creating a new system that truly supports every child. And we're developing proposals. We want to work with parents and teachers to get this right, and I would expect him to welcome that.
Sir Ed Davey.
Well, I thank the Prime Minister for his reply. We want to work across the House to fix the mess that lay live. We don't want another welfare-style mess this time. We've got to fix this properly for parents and children. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government badly undermined the security of our borders by ripping up the returns agreement that allowed us to send migrants back to Europe. So I hope the Prime Minister can secure a new returns agreement with France that acts as a real deterrent to stop the votes. And the Conservatives also sent hundreds of millions of pounds to France and got nothing in return. Does the Prime Minister agree that any new funding to the French government must be conditional on them agreeing a returns deal and doing their bit to stop the votes?
Mr. Speaker, we're working closely with the French on this issue. We'll only provide funding that delivers for our priorities. We are working closely. We share information to a much greater extent than was the case before. We've got a new specialist intelligence unit at Dunkirk, and we're the first government to persuade the French to review their laws and tactics on the North Coast to take more effective action. I'll be discussing this at meetings with President Macron both today and tomorrow.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of recent events, could the Prime Minister update the House on the work of the COVID Corruption Commissioner? And does he agree with my constituents in Rugby, Bulkington and the surrounding villages that there should be no place in public life for people who exploited the pandemic and defrauded the taxpayer to line their own pockets?
My honourable friend makes a powerful point, and I hope it was heard on the benches opposite. It's an absolute scandal that failed PPE contracts were handed out by the Conservatives at taxpayer funds of £1.4 billion. We're focused on getting our money back. I can confirm the Commissioner is now investigating fraud involving bounce back and business support loans, and we will continue to go after the fraudsters, the grifters and the con artists, no matter who they are or where we find them.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The main reason this country decided
Some of you want to get in a little later. If this takes forever, you won't get in. Nigel Farage.
Thank you. The main reason this country wisely voted for Brexit back in 2016, and that included millions of Labour supporters, is because we wanted to take back control of our borders so that we and we alone could decide who comes and settles in our country. Does the Prime Minister understand that that demand today is even greater than it was back in 2016, and that we demand, the country demands, that you say to the French President, will you shut up? That you say to the French President, we will not accept undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant anti-Brexit French President.
Mr. Speaker, we are fixing the mess that we inherited. We are working with other countries to ensure that we take the measures necessary to stop people crossing the Channel. They are serious answers to serious problems. His proposal for 10 years, wagging the Tory dog, has been to break everything and claim that's how you fix things, to stick two fingers up at your neighbours and then expect them to work with us. And he votes against the Borders Bill, which gives more powers to our law enforcement to deal with security at our borders. And, Mr. Speaker, the reason for that is he has no interest in fixing the problem because he wants to milk it and exploit it. That's the truth about him and his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From homelessness to child poverty, so many of the challenges that I see people facing in Exeter can be traced back to early years. So can I welcome how this government is rebuilding on the legacy of Sure Start, so cruelly dismantled by the party opposite? And can the Prime Minister set out what difference this will make to family services in Exeter?
Well, I'm grateful to him, and I've discussed it with him before. He's a brilliant champion for Exeter. Mr. Speaker, every child should have support to realise their potential. And the party opposite tore up Sure Start and took it out of our communities, an act, in my view, of vandalism that abandoned families and deepened inequalities. Mr. Speaker, we're delivering 1,000 Best Start family hubs across the country. That's in addition to free childcare being rolled out and expanding free school meals. That's the change the Labour government makes.
Jim Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Growing numbers of people are joining calls for a wealth tax on the super-rich, including former Labour leader Lord Kinnock, and today a former First Minister of Wales, and it transpires, the Chancellor herself when she was in opposition. So will the Prime Minister stand by his promise that those with the broadest shoulders should carry the largest burden? And can he clarify that that means the ultra-wealthy, not disabled people, the poorest, and children with special educational needs?
Mr. Speaker, I'm really not going to take advice from a party that put forward £80 billion of unfunded commitments at the last election. That's the sort of thing that got us into the problem in the first place. Mr. Speaker, we can't just tax our way to growth. We need to ensure that we put in place the necessary measures. We're putting in place planning reforms, Mr. Speaker, to drive growth. He voted against it and they voted against it.
Bill Lester.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud that this Labour government is banning fire and rehire. I am proud that we are addressing the abusive use of zero-hour contracts and improving protections at work, particularly against unfair dismissal. Reform and their Tory friends voted against Labour's workplace protections. I don't know why they're heckling. When they were in government, they promised to deal with fire and rehire, and after, and despite the scandal at P&O, did absolutely nothing about it. So, does my right honourable friend agree that it is only this Labour government which will ensure people have fairness at work in this country.
Well, I'm proud that we'll give 15 million workers, that's half of all workers, stronger rights at work. And Mr. Speaker, that's sick pay for up to 1.3 million of the lowest paid, tackling sexual harassment and bereavement leave for families who experience pregnancy loss before 24 weeks. Compare that to the Leader of the Opposition who thinks maternity pay is excessive. The Leader of Reform who wants working people to pay tax for tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. Both of them vote against reform and better protection of workers at every term. They always have and they always will. They offer nothing for working people.
Sir David Davis.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, before my question, can I tell the House that in the public gallery today there are a number of veterans of Northern Ireland. Given what the Prime Minister said about 7/7, I'd like to publicly thank them for their courage in defending our country and our democracy against the first scourge of terrorism. Now, the Prime Minister knows that every time a paramilitary was killed in Northern Ireland by a British soldier, it triggered a thorough investigation. No bullet went unscrutinised. Our soldiers were held to the highest standards of law. The IRA were not. They tortured and shot men in the back. They forced families to watch their menfolk murdered. They killed women and children with bombs. Yet we're willing to prosecute our own men. Men forced to make life and death decisions in split seconds. If the government get the legacy legislation wrong, at least 50 innocent retired veterans will be exposed to legal persecution for crimes they did not commit. Now, I've raised this matter 6 times now since February. So I ask again, on Monday, when we debate this matter in Westminster Hall, will his government protect our veterans, or will it sacrifice them to politically motivated lawyers trying to rewrite history with a pack of lies?
Well, can I join him in his thanks to the veterans here today with us and to all veterans. And, I mean, he knows this is a serious issue and the outing of his, at the end of his question didn't really reflect that seriousness because the scheme that was set up by the party opposite was found to be unlawful in the courts, and he knows it. And it wasn't supported by the communities. It would have meant, as he knows, immunity from prosecution for those who committed the most appalling terrorist crimes. And that's why it didn't have support in the communities and didn't have the support, I think, of any political party in Northern Ireland. And that was amongst the reason it was found to be unlawful. So we have to tread carefully, we have to get this right. And I'll work with him on that, but we don't get there by cheapening the debate. We will look at the address. It's not about political point scoring. I worked in Northern Ireland, I've spoken to many of the people affected, and I know we must get this right, and I want to do so, and I want the House to do it together if we possibly can, because it matters. But we have to do that in a serious way, to address the issues of the past, of course, in a way that has support of victims and survivors, and that is a key test. For me, because without the support of victims and survivors, I think it's very hard in Northern Ireland to come up with something which will have the confidence of everybody in Northern Ireland, which is why we have to work in the way we do. In advance of the new legislation, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland continues to engage with veterans and their communities to ensure that legacy mechanisms are fair, that they're lawful and they're proportionate. And I'll continue to work with him and others in the House, because the most important thing is not scoring points but getting it right.
Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I published a report which revealed the terrible legacy left by the party opposite on the NHS locally. Kids in Basingstoke waiting 210 days following a referral for access to mental health services, 3 times the national average. So I welcome the publication of the 10-year plan last week, led by the Prime Minister, to be delivered by a Labour Health Secretary, made possible by a Labour Chancellor. But can I ask the Prime Minister what more the government is able to do to close that gap in mental health services locally and ensure that every kid in Basingstoke has access to the very best mental health services?
Well, I thank him for that. The party opposite failed to give children the support that they need. The 10-year plan that we've put forward will rewire our NHS and transform mental health services. 85 dedicated mental health A&E departments giving 24/7 support, specialist mental health professionals in every school and college, benefiting 1 million young people this year alone, and an extra 8,500 mental health staff to tackle long waits. And that is only because of the decisions that we took to invest in our NHS, decisions that they opposed.
Jess Brown-Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to add to the many calls that this Prime Minister has already heard about the broken SEND system. I met with head teachers and SENCOs in my constituency of Chichester last week. They all told me the same thing, that the SEND system is broken, it's adversarial, parents are at breaking point, there are not enough spaces in specialist schools, and the EHCP process is long, it's harrowing, and it's often degrading. Now, I know the government are exploring their options, but will he take the Liberal Democrat calls to introduce a national body for SEND so that we can end the postcode lottery and fix this problem for good?
Well, I thank her for raising this issue, and I know it's of concern to her and to many people across the House. The system we've got is broken. It's not serving anyone well. We've got to reform it, and I set out in an earlier answer the steps that we are taking. We will share those with the House, and I hope that we can get the greatest support possible for the reform that I think everybody here knows has to happen.
Catherine Fuchs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted at the spending review commitment of £445 million for Welsh Rail. A new station at Meigrenundi will take cars off the congested M4, offer greener journeys and open doors for local residents without a vehicle to get jobs. And it's great value for money due to the track and infrastructure that's already in place there. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that Meigrenundi is an excellent candidate to be the first Burn station built so it can start serving local people?
Well, it's so good to see strong Labour MPs standing up for Wales and her constituency. She makes her case. I can't confirm the plans yet, but we will consider recommendations from the Burns Commission, which includes a proposal for a new station in her constituency. And I'm delighted, Mr. Speaker, just this week we set out a major road and rail schemes across the country, the A66, Newark Bypass, Midlands Rail Hub, creating tens of thousands of jobs, new homes and better journeys for millions of travellers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the past few weeks, I've spoken to 5 people from my rural constituency of North Devon who have been forced to remove their own teeth with pliers or with amateur surgical kits bought online because they are unable to find an NHS dentist. What would the Prime Minister say to those people, Mr. Speaker? And when will the government banish this dentistry crisis to the history books where it belongs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, another shameful legacy from the party opposite, with 1 in 4 adults struggling with NHS care and tooth decay as the most common reason for hospital admissions for children aged 5 to 9 under their watch. We are fixing this, Mr. Speaker, and I can set out what we're doing. We're rolling out 700,000 urgent and emergency appointments. We're reforming the dental contract and recruiting more dentists and newly qualified dentists to practice in the NHS for a minimum period. All of that only made possible because of the investment we put in the budget, which they all opposed.
Melanie Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Tax evasion, money laundering, illicit goods, illegal working all undermine our high streets like Freeman Street in my own constituency, undermine local business confidence and challenge community cohesion. That's a reality around the country because of the explosion of vape shops, fake barbers, Harry Potter shops, American candy stores. Will the Prime Minister commit to working with his cabinet to bring in a national strategy to tackle the scourges of the high street and restore high street confidence?
Well, she's right to highlight this issue, Mr. Speaker. In March, we saw a major crackdown against criminals using high street businesses to launder money, and with almost 400 properties securing freezing orders over bank accounts totalling more than £1 million and arresting 35 individuals. There's much more to come, and I thank her for highlighting this really important issue.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister was elected on a promise
to smash the gangs. He said he would reduce small boat crossings. He said he would close asylum hotels. Why are all these issues going wrong?
Mr. Speaker, we are fixing the problem that they said they'd take control of borders and they lost it. We're working hard with our allies. We want to bring forward more powers for our law enforcement of the borders through our Borders Bill to give them the powers they need to take the job and deal with it. And what did they do? They voted against. A confected argument.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow evening sees the annual National Police Bravery Awards. 3 of the officers nominated this year are 3 of the officers who were first on the scene of the tragedy in my Southport constituency last summer. So will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to Sergeant Gregory Gillespie, Constable Luke Holden and PCSO Timothy Parry, who are with us in the gallery today, for their immense bravery in the face of evil. And just like our brave officers will always protect and defend us when we need them to, does he agree with me that this government will always support our brave officers in return?
Well, can I start by saying that the thoughts of the whole House, of course, are with the families of those that lost their little girls and all those affected by this terrible incident. I would like to put on record our heartfelt thanks to all of those who responded and those that are with us today: Sergeant Gregory Gillespie, PC Luke Holden, PCSO Timothy Parry. These officers ran towards danger to protect young lives, Mr. Speaker. I have met a number of them, and it is truly humbling to see the bravery and professionalism that they brought to their job that day and every day. Southport is a wonderful and loving community. In difficult days, they've shown kindness, empathy and courage. And I'd like to thank my honourable friend for all that he has done in relation to those values as well.
Ben Lake.
Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Mr. Brian Buckle, is a victim of a miscarriage of justice. He was wrongfully imprisoned for over 5 years before being exonerated at retrial. Now, Mr. Speaker, despite a jury unanimously finding him not guilty of the crimes for which he was imprisoned and the devastating impact this injustice continues to have on him and his family, his application for compensation was denied due to a 2014 change to the law that requires those who have been wrongfully imprisoned to prove their innocence beyond all reasonable doubt. This is an almost impossible hurdle to overcome. And so would the Prime Minister consider meeting with Mr Buckle to discuss his case and lend his support to Appeal's campaign for fair compensation for those who have been victims of a miscarriage of justice?
Well, can I thank you for raising this particular case, which saw a grave miscarriage of justice. In relation to the statutory test for compensation, this has been raised in the House before, and I've undertaken to have a look at it. And I know he's working, I think, with the Minister responsible on the particular case that he raises.
Mayor Liz.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for leading from the front in promoting the importance of his role as a father in keeping time for family life. I'm delighted that this government in the past week has launched a review into parental leave, and we've started to rebuild the legacy of Sure Start by launching our Best Start family hubs, both things that will make a huge difference to my constituents in Ribble Valley. Can he commit to this parental leave review, creating some truly ambitious outcomes so that we can make the UK not only a world-leading place to live and do business, but also the best place in the world to live a rewarding family life?
Well, I think the first full review of parental leave and pay is a landmark moment. The current system is simply out of date and too complicated. 1 in 3 dads don't take paternity leave, often because they can't afford to do so. Mr Speaker, that's a great loss to them and their children. I want parents to be able to give their child the best care and make the system work better for employers.
Final question, Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Following a week of internal conflict, the Prime Minister should be well prepared if he wants to join me this weekend at the Tewkesbury Medieval Festival, which includes Europe's largest reenactment. Or perhaps next weekend he'll don his leather jacket and turn it up to 11 at the Tewkesbury Live Music Festival, hosted by hospitality venues across the town. Regardless, will he join me in thanking the volunteers and those hospitality venues that make Tewkesbury the unsung nucleus of Gloucestershire's culture.
Mr. Speaker, what an invitation. I'm grateful for the invite to join the medieval festival. But if I wanted to see a load of people stuck in the past and fighting each other, I'd probably go to the next meeting of the Shadow Cabinet. Thank you.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. Let the front bench change over. Point of order, Lee Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, during PMQs today, the honourable member for Clacton asked what I thought was quite a reasonable question, because I knew what the question was going to be, but during PMQs, I couldn't hear a single word. And I'm sure people in this chamber couldn't, because people like the honourable member for Dewsbury behind me never shut up all the way through. The honourable member for Clacton was trying to ask a reasonable question. We do not subscribe to this sort of dog whistle politics in Reform UK. So, Mr. Speaker, could you please give us advice on how to stop this behaviour in the future?
What I would say is I think Mr Farage is capable of dealing with his own battles, that we've seen on many occasions. What I would say is, look, it is about respect, it is about tolerance that we should show to each other, because what we do in here is reflected outside. So please, let us show common sense but respect for each other. A point of order, Adrian Ramsey, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At Prime Minister's questions just now, in response to my question, the Prime Minister claimed that the Green Party had made unfunded spending commitments in our general election manifesto, something that he also said in response to me at last week's Prime Minister's questions. That is clearly untrue. Our manifesto was fully costed, including through the proposals for a wealth tax that I was calling for. So please could you, Mr. Speaker, outline how I can correct the record? Should I send a copy of our manifesto to the Prime Minister?
Can I first of all say, look, I'm not going to continue a debate of Prime Minister's questions. I did end it. What I would say is, I think you have corrected it with what you stated. It is now on the record. Right, let us move on now. We come to the urgent question. Shadow Secretary of State, Robert General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Justice if she will make a statement on her plans to restrict jury trial through the creation of a Crown Court bench division and related sentencing changing.
Mr. Speaker, this government inherited a justice system in crisis, with record and rising backlogs in our criminal courts, leaving victims in limbo waiting to see justice done. For this reason, the Lord Chancellor commissioned Sir Brian Leveson to undertake a once-in-a-generation review of the criminal courts. We're grateful to Sir Brian for all his work. His report confirms that the system that we inherited is broken, and that if we do nothing, it will collapse. We welcome the ambitious recommendations he's put forward and agree that a crisis of this scale requires bold action. We must consider any measures that will put our courts on a more stable and sustainable footing. Victims and the public deserve swift justice and a court system that they can have confidence in. We will consider Sir Brian's recommendations on jury trials, along with everything else, carefully before providing a formal response to Parliament, and we will do so in the autumn. Jury trials are and will remain a cornerstone of British justice and will remain in place for the most serious cases. However, justice delayed is justice denied. The system was not designed for a scenario where there are tens of thousands of victims waiting years for justice. The Lord Chancellor and this government is committed to turning the tide on the Crown Court backlog by the end of this Parliament and creating a sustainable justice system fit for the 21st century.
Robert Jenny.
Mr. Speaker, all of us agree that justice delayed is justice denied. That is why it's so important to get control of the court backlog. No one pretends that this is straightforward, but this government has made the crisis worse. The backlog is at a record high and accelerating, with 750 cases being added every month. Sir Brian Levison's review rightly acknowledges that we must increase the number of court sitting days, and we thank him for his work and welcome many of his recommendations. However, it cannot be right to give another sentencing discount for those convicted of crimes like burglary and stalking. This could see criminals serve as little as a fifth of their sentence when combined with the Gawk review. 20% of a sentence served. Is that justice for victims? Out-of-court settlements for drug dealers and thieves, meaning they won't even get a criminal record. It makes a mockery of the criminal justice system. And just as concerning is the proposal to scrap jury trials in many cases. The report admits that this will only have a limited effect on the backlog. It will save just £31 million, 0.2% of the department's budget. And as the report says, there is no limit to the cases for which jury trials could be scrapped. This is a slippery slope towards abolishing jury trials altogether. Now, jury trials have been a central part of our Constitution for centuries. In Magna Carta, indeed before it, they are a gift that we have given to the world. To throw them away so casually shows a total disregard for our Constitution and for such limited benefit. For too many on the government benches, it seems they want to scrap jury trials regardless of the backlog because they don't trust the British public's instincts on justice. They say judges know best, we say the public know best. It doesn't have to be this way. The government must take up the Lady Chief Justice offer of more sitting days. So, will she rule out yet another sentencing cut for criminals? Will she rule out letting drug dealers and thieves avoid even a criminal record? And does she accept that scrapping jury trials is a disgraceful and unnecessary rejection of one of our country's proudest and most ancient liberties?
Minister.
What I didn't hear in any of that was an apology. It's extraordinary to hear that the Shadow Justice Secretary has suddenly discovered a sense of urgency. Where was that sense of urgency, Mr. Speaker, in the last 14 years? The so-called party of law and order that allowed two things to happen. First, taking our prison system to the brink of collapse. That let down the public and it let down victims. Soft on crime and soft on law and order. And secondly, allowing the backlogs in our Crown Courts to run out of control to record highs. For 14 years, they did absolutely nothing. Let me explain the contrast between a party and a government that is gripping the crisis and is tough on law and order. We commissioned one of their own, Sir David Gawk, to give us his review on the sentencing review. We've commissioned one of our most revered judges, Sir Brian Levison, who today has set out his recommendations. We're not going to provide our policy response today because they demand and require seriousness, not what we hear from the Shadow Justice Secretary, but serious, careful analysis, and we will provide our formal response to this House in the autumn. But we're not delaying. We're not waiting, we're investing in the system. So to take up his challenge about what the Lady Chief Justice said, we have already done what they failed to do, an additional 4,000 Crown Court sitting days, a record level of 110,000 sitting days a year, up from what the so-called party of law and order gave us. We also understand that we need proper system capacity. We heard from the Lord Chancellor yesterday, it's not just simply about adding more Crown Court sitting days. We cannot, as Sir Brian Levison tells us, had he bothered to read the report, we cannot simply sit our way out of this crisis. We've got to build system capacity more judges, more prosecutors, more defence lawyers, more court ushers. Of course we need to invest in the system, which is what this government is doing, with a promise for £450 million into our courts, additional to what the party opposite provided, because we are staying laser focused on our mission here, which is to provide swifter justice for victims and to restore public confidence in a justice system that was left to rack and ruin by the party opposite. He's jumped the gun. We have been very clear. We are going to consider Sir Brian's careful and detailed report. We're going to listen to those who represent victims. We're going to listen to the barristers and the judges who do such an exceptional job. And we will do what it takes to look that victim of rape, who today, if she reports a rape or a serious crime, is being told that she will have to wait till 2028, 2029 in some cases for her day in court. That is unacceptable. And that is why we will do whatever it takes with the seriousness that the other side simply failed to do.
Chair of the Select Committee on this.
Mr. Speaker, what Sir Brian's comprehensive report demonstrates is the terrible state our once envied criminal justice system was left in by the Shadow Lord Chancellor and his colleagues. Does she agree with Sir Brian that digging ourselves out of the hole which they have left us in will require more investment, greater efficiency and structural change? And isn't that the debt that we owe to, in particular, victims of crime, to ensure that they get justice? And it's up to this government to put right the wrongs that have been done over the last 14 years.
Minister.
The Chairman of the Justice Select Committee, as ever, gives a considered response and is absolutely right. What is required here is two things: a recognition of the scale of the problem, which demands investment and reform. Sir Brian, if you read the report, is very clear. Yes, we need investment, and it's investment which this government is already beginning to make. The additional Crown Court sitting days that we've laid on this year, running the system at system max, additional funding for legal aid lawyers in criminal legal aid, £92 million to keep the sector going, both on the defence and the prosecutorial side. We are making that investment, but critically, and this is the critical thing, Sir Brian makes absolutely clear that alone will not be enough. We need to consider once-in-a-generation structural reforms that will run a sustainable, proportionate system that will allow us to deliver swifter justice for victims. Investment and reform, that is what we will be getting on with, and that's what we will report on in the autumn.
Dr. Neil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister will know the high regard in which I hold her. But with that in mind, does she in her own heart believe that intermediate courts will fix the criminal court backlog, or does she agree with the legal profession that it risks being a costly distraction from investing in the existing system? And does she agree with me that chipping away with jury trials in the name of speed risks undermining the cornerstone of British justice?
Minister.
Well, as I said in my opening statement, jury trials will remain a cornerstone for British justice for the most serious cases. But as Sir Brian Leveson evidences in his careful report, juryless trials can be swifter trials. And the fact is we need to put this into some context. 90% of criminal trials in this country are currently heard without a jury. That is how our criminal justice system currently functions. And whilst of course it's right that we listen to those who participate in the system, who represent whether they are prosecuting or defending those in the system, it's also right that we listen to those voices that have welcomed today's report. The head of the Met Police, former Lord Chancellors, former Lord Chief Justice, and the Victims Commissioner. Their voices matter in this too. And I think, just as Sir Brian has done, we need to consider a package of measures capable of alleviating the acute crisis in which we find ourselves in.
Mr. Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree with me that trial by jury is and will always remain a fundamental concept of our British justice system, but we also need to ensure that we restore victims' faith in the system and to do what we can to ensure that justice is not denied by justice being delayed?
Minister.
He's absolutely right. The Shadow Secretary for Justice quotes Magna Carta, but the state's obligation is to ensure a fair trial, and essential to a fair trial is timely justice. In circumstances where some victims of crime are waiting 2-3 years for their day in court, that's not fair. And in fact, it's resulting in many victims actually pulling out of trials, rendering court time wasted and re-traumatising those victims. What he hasn't read is the entirety of Magna Carta, and I quote, Magna Carta says, "To no one will we delay right or justice." The right to a timely trial is embedded in Magna Carta, and we need to get back to delivering it.
Liberal Democrats spokesperson, Josh Papper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Shadow Justice Secretary said in his response that the public knows best, and for once I agree with him, which is why the public threw out the last Conservative government after crashing our criminal justice system. Now, Mr. Speaker, yesterday I made the case for safeguarding the guarantors of our justice system, our jury trials. But today, my concern that I want to raise on behalf of the Liberal Democrats is that reclassifying certain offences and drawing on magistrates for a new intermediate court risks putting unbearable strain on the magistrates' courts and jeopardises their ability to deliver swift justice, especially for survivors of domestic abuse crimes. So before adopting any new proposals, will the Minister publish an impact assessment of these measures on victims in magistrates' courts, and will she rule out any measures that will delay justice, safety or freedom for survivors of domestic abuse?
Minister.
The proposal for reclassification of certain offences in Sir Brian's report is just that. It's Sir Brian's recommendation, and as I've said already, we need to take those recommendations away and consider whether they are appropriate for our justice system. But he's right to highlight the essential role that the magistrates play in our criminal justice system. It's right that currently today, 90% of criminal trials are heard in our magistrates' court, and they do a phenomenal job. It's why we are continuing to recruit 2,000 magistrates annually. We want a more diverse magistracy. All of that will be essential. And he's right, these proposals, which Sir Brian has conveyed as a package, they need to interlock, they need to be operable together, and that is why we are taking the summer to engage with stakeholders like the Magistrates Association to ensure we get this right.
Matt Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the Crown Court backlog that we inherited being at such high levels and continuing to rise, does the Minister agree with me that we cannot just add more sitting days to tackle, but instead we need fundamental reform?
Minister.
The crisis that we inherited in our criminal courts with record and rising backlogs is intolerable. The human impact of that, whether you're a victim, whether you are a witness, whether you are someone who serves in the criminal justice system, is simply intolerable. And if we do nothing, as the party opposite was all too willing to do, then again, in the words of one of their own, former Lord Chancellor Alex Chalk, the system will become irrecoverable. It's not enough to sit our way out of this crisis. We have to have radical structural reform as well. That is the abiding lesson of Sir Brian's report, and we will take it on board.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We should thank Sir Brian for his report and carefully consider his recommendations. But criminals already get a 1/3 discount for an early plea of guilty. And the idea that that should be increased to 40% risks undermining trust in the criminal justice system by victims. And jury trials are a centuries-old cornerstone of the British justice system. And creation of an intermediate court to save £35 million, it really isn't worth it when we have 81 empty courtrooms. We have judges available and ready to sit. We need to build capacity and make the jury system work.
Minister.
Well, I agree with him that I think we all owe a debt of gratitude to Sir Brian Leveson and his team for the comprehensive review which they've undertaken and which the government will be giving due consideration to over the summer before we formally provide our response. We've also got to ensure that whatever proposals and package of proposals that we take forward, that knits together with the recommendations from the Gork review and indeed the outcome of the spending review that we in Ministry of Justice have received, with a commitment to make an additional investment of £450 million into our courts. I do want to address his point about intermediate courts. This isn't about saving money. No. This is about addressing the backlog and delivering swifter justice for victims and a criminal justice system in which the public can have confidence. If this package of ideas is right and will achieve that aim, then we will pursue it.
Dame Emily Palmer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I spent my first 20 years in professional life in the criminal courts as a barrister, and there is no one who loves the criminal justice system more than I do, and no one who has more respect for the juries than I do. But if you go into the courts now, they're not what they were. And the fact of the matter is that the delays are so appalling that if you were a defendant, you just plead not guilty, because you know that your case isn't going to come up for years, and the chances of actually facing justice are minimalised. So it's in that extreme state that we have inherited from the benches opposite that radical action is needed. And I would ask, therefore, the front bench, who I know feel as I do about the criminal justice system and want it to work, that will they, when considering Sir Brian's recommendations, will they consider a sunset clause? Because if his recommendations work, there will become a time when we can increase the amount of jury service again.
Minister.
She speaks with a huge amount of authority and personal experience of how our Crown Courts operate. And she, like us, has a commitment to restoring and rebuilding our criminal justice system to what it once was, and to a system that is fit for the 21st century and one that the public can have confidence in. And that means adapting our methods, taking on new technologies, becoming more efficient. All of that will come, as we've asked Sir Brian to do, in the second part of his review. I'm not going to preempt the response or give a running commentary on it, but all of these things will be taken into account as we consider our response over the summer.
Sure, Randall.
Mr. Speaker, last year I was on a jury. Now, we all know we need to get the court backlog down, but from my experience at Reading Crown Court, the availability of jurors really wasn't an issue. Many of us were sat there for hours upon hours, and several jurors were dismissed on the Thursday, having never set foot in a courtroom. So, before we move forward in restricting the number of jury trials, what work has the government done to actually understand the utilisation of jurors, see how many of them are actually being used and whether they can be used more effectively?
Minister.
The issue, and I thank him for his service, and all those who perform the civic duty of participating in a jury, something which, as I've said, will remain a cornerstone of British justice for the most serious cases. But that is not the issue. The issue is the fact that demand coming into the system simply outstrips the rate at which the courts are able to address and dispose of these cases. What we need to look at is the system capacity, the amount of judicial time, the number of prosecutors, the number of defence lawyers, the availability of suitable court buildings, the availability of ushers, the availability of legal aid. All of that system capacity and getting it working together is what we need to do to address the challenges that others have outlined. And I ought to remind him that not only are 90% of our criminal trials heard in magistrates' court, but it remains a fact that magistrates' courts deliver on average a turnaround of those cases 4 or 5 times faster than it currently takes in the Crown. That is swift justice for victims, and it's why we need to look at whole system reform.
Stop.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituents have a very simple view of the criminal justice system. They want to know that the victims of crime will have their day in court, and they'll want to know that the perpetrators of crime will have a punishment commensurate with the crime that they commit. And that underpins their faith in the system, so they come forward to report crimes. So whilst the party opposite seek to talk down the justice system, can the Minister set out what her and her department are doing to ensure that victims of crime feel confident enough to come forward to report crimes, hopeful that they'll get the outcome that they want?
Minister.
When he speaks so passionately on the part of his constituents, I think what the public asks is something really simple. That if you're unfortunate enough to be a victim of a crime, you expect to have your day in court in a timely fashion, not to be told that you are going to be made to wait for years, that you get your day in court only to find that the trial has become ineffective and put off for yet another year. That undermines people's faith in the system, and that is what's so detrimental about the effect of the neglect and underinvestment of the other side, of of the party opposite, because it's been so corrosive of trust in the justice system. It's not simply that we're not delivering swift justice for victims, it's that the public risks losing faith in what has been, to date, one of the glories of this country, which is our justice system.
Sir Julian.
Does the Minister agree that one of the worst features of the US justice system is the extreme process of plea bargaining, which gives such a huge differential if you plead guilty that it creates a perverse incentive to do so even if you're innocent but not confident that you'll be acquitted? Can she guarantee that we are not going down that route with a combination of a 40% discount for pleading guilty coupled with early release for other reasons?
Minister.
The English common law and our commitment to rule of law with our independent judiciary is part of what makes this country great. We're not going to ape the American system or any other system. The fact that Sir Brian Levison's report contains recommendations, including around aspects such as the use of Goodyear indications, is something that we will look at carefully. But we know that our law is robust, and provided we have a justice system that is up to the task of enforcing that law, that is what we are really focused on.
Mr. Speaker, under the Tories last year, 60% of rape victims dropped out of their cases because they were left waiting years for justice. We finally have a Justice Secretary who's put victims first and allocated the highest number of sitting days on record. Given all the outrage from the benches opposite at the size of the backlog, I'm really keen to know what they did. But can the Minister answer what this Labour government are doing to get the victims the justice quicker?
Minister.
Well, she's absolutely right. We talk about sitting days, we talk about backlogs, and it can all sound a little bit arid and academic, but it comes back to people. Yeah. The fact that so many victims of rape and serious sexual offences pull out of the process is testament to the fact the system isn't working. That is the direct consequence of allowing the backlogs to run out of control. We have to keep victims engaged in the process. It's why we've invested specifically in victim services. It's why we're looking to strengthen the Victims Code. But ultimately, what victims want is swift justice. That is why we will take a careful look at Sir Brian's recommendations and do what it takes to bring down that backlog.
Ms. Supple-Roberts.
Magistrates' courts are already under significant stress. 22% of trials do not go ahead on the day they're listed. Removing the right to choose a jury trial for sentences of under 2 years under an intermediate court cannot reverse years of underfunding, the closure of local courts and severe staff shortages from prosecutors, of course, to defence advocates. The reform of local justice areas consultation proposes to merge 3 North Wales benches against the advice of local magistrates. Does the Minister recognise, therefore, the risk of yet further disruption to justice in Wales?
Minister.
Well, what she has described is how important the role of the Magistrates' Court is going to be, but also the importance of whole system reform. We are not looking as a government to tweaking one aspect, tweaking what goes on in the Magistrates' Court, tweaking what goes on in the Crown Court. Of course, one of the geniuses, if you like, of the Magistrates' Court is the local link, is the fact that it delivers local justice. So we will look at that carefully. But there is no getting away from it. The scale of the problem, and what Sir Brian's report tells us today, is that we need whole system reform from beginning to end of the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her statement today and the recognition of the importance of magistrates' courts. Sadly, Harlow Magistrates Court and Chorley Magistrates Court, of course, were closed by the previous government. I recently spoke to a police officer in my constituency of Harlow. He's been a police officer for 3 years. He's being asked to gather evidence to go to court for crimes that were committed before he was even a police officer. I asked the Minister, is it any wonder that victims have lost confidence in the process, in the system? And this government needs to ensure we have fundamental reforms to this process to ensure that people in my constituency of Harlow get the justice they deserve.
And we could reopen the courts of Chorley. They're available.
Well, again, I come back to the fact that this government is investing in our court estate. We've invested an additional £20 million in our court buildings for maintenance and to keep the show on the road. But he's absolutely right. The delays reach a tipping point if we choose to do nothing about it. That is simply not an option. And the obligation on the state is to deliver a fair trial, and timeliness is critical to that, because the longer you wait, the more likely it is that victims will pull out of the system, the evidence becomes undermined because people's memories fade. That's why timeliness and getting the delays down is so critical to the mission that we've got to pursue.
Andrew Stone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I mean, here we go again. Labour always talk tough on crime and then always go soft. And the Minister referred to some defence of this by talking about David Gauke as one of our own, as some defence of that. I can assure you I've probably got more in common with the Minister than I do David Gauke, and that is not a good way to show off your tough on crime credentials. But I have seen firsthand where the courts, the police and the CPS work together to cut through all the bureaucracy, the backlogs, to get tough on crime. In Lancashire, through what Warrior, there's 23 organised crime gang members every single week being taken off the streets, many remanded straight into prison, and the cases going through the courts. So could I plead with the Minister to rule out as soon as possible any of the measures that have been recommended that would see those organised crime gang members potentially not even getting a criminal record?
Minister.
Well, I'm afraid that it's a bit rich to accuse this side of the House of being soft on crime. A party that allows the prisons to run hot. A party that added 500 prison places in 14 years, where we've committed the money for 14,000. It simply just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And allowing the backlogs in the court to simply run out of control to the point where, again, another of their own, Alex Chalk, points out that the position will become irrecoverable. That's the consequence of doing nothing. Being tough on crime is about rebuilding our criminal justice system. It's about investing in it, it's about investing in prisons, investing in our courts, and delivering on the tough reforms that are going to be required to deliver swifter justice for victims, and getting tough on exactly the sorts of gangs that he describes.
Catherine Atkins.
Mr. Speaker, after 14 years of Conservative government, victims of rape and serious sexual crimes are waiting years to see justice. It does appear that the Shadow Justice Secretary has recently discovered that our criminal justice system is broken. When does the Minister think he'll discover who broke it?
Minister.
When the Victims Commissioner,
Mr. Stewart, I don't need any challenges from you, and you should know better. You are on the Speaker's panel. I really do think you've got to think about what you're saying, and your behaviour is getting intolerable.
When the Victims Commissioner, the London Victims Commissioner, those who engage and support victims through victim services, tell me that we have to take this opportunity for once-in-a-generation reform because we are letting victims of crimes down, I take that more seriously than any other pleas for change. It's absolutely obvious that the delays of running a system with such record and rising backlogs, the failure to invest, it has consequences on real people's lives. People are pulling out of the system, pulling out of the process because they've simply lost faith in it. And I will be thinking of their voices, of the victims, in every day that we look to consider these proposals and as we drive them forward. Failure is not an option.
Tessamant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have that caution about stripping back jury trials. So I'll ask the government to commit to tackling court backlogs by investing in more court capacity, particularly in Bristol and the West Country, and supporting rehabilitation to stop reoffending and people coming back into the system so quickly. But can I, and also to address the root causes of crime, but can I also ask the Minister to consider that just under the Leveson proposals, there may be space for some of the best examples of the US court system, where some states have next-day hearings for domestic abuse cases, where the courts can catch perpetrators in the window of remorse and they'll recognise their guilt and accept that they need to change.
Minister.
She's right that as we take forward and when we are ready to announce the package of reforms in response to Sir Brian's review, that we consider how we can take forward the best of our existing system and indeed learn from other systems. So whether that's intensive supervision courts, where we've seen some really good results, tackling the root cause of what lies behind crime and engaging in preventative measures. We should be doing all of that. And this is our opportunity. We've reached a point of crisis. We've reached the point of emergency, no more, no less, as a result of the inheritance from the previous government. But we've got to take the opportunity to build back better, a more sustainable, more innovative justice system that the public can have confidence in and that protects the public. That's what we must do. So you're right. We should learn, we should listen and build something better.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alex Chalk, the former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary, as I think members on all sides would agree, is someone who was taken very seriously in this place and whose opinions were taken seriously. Recently, he said, and I quote, "It could conceivably be dealt with by a judge and two wingers to reserve Crown Court for the most serious cases." He also went on to say, and I quote, "It is helpful to look at which cases should be triable either way and which should be summary only." Does she agree with me that it is worth taking note of serious voices like Alex Chalk rather than the opportunism of the shadow justice secretary?
Minister.
This issue is far too serious not to take seriously. And when I listen to the voices like the former Lord Chancellor, like the former Lord Chief Justice, Sir Ian Burnett, the Victims Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, all of them saying we've got to take these matters and these recommendations seriously. It's that serious work that this government is going to engage in, and we will not duck the difficult decisions.
Bob Blatton.
Thank you, Speaker. The Minister quite rightly points to the comparative inefficiency between Crown Courts and Magistrates' Courts. But the clear issue here is that we need new technology to be introduced to Crown Courts so that people who are on trial, and indeed the victims, are served faster and quicker and more expediently. The reality is that many of these cases collapse as a result of the evidence not being sufficient and not being brought fast enough. So why is it then that she's allowed the efficiencies part of the Leveson report to be delayed when that could actually bring forward the much needed recommendations that we could action and cut the backlog?
Minister.
He raises an extremely helpful point, which is how can we improve efficiencies in our courts through the use of technology, including technology that is improving rapidly before our eyes. So, for example, the Ministry of Justice is currently piloting use of AI technology in some of our tribunals for transcription. How could that be utilised and rolled out more widely across the courts and tribunals? He's absolutely right. But Sir Brian, give him his credit, him and his team has worked incredibly fast to produce a detailed, careful and well-evidenced report today. He's going to continue with part 2 of his review. Our job in the Ministry of Justice as we develop our policy thinking will be to bring those two parts of the review together to improve our criminal justice system.
And Goldsborough.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Some may say we're old school in South Norfolk, but I call it common sense. Criminals should be punished and victims should get their day of justice. Simply hoping for more sitting days will fix the Crown Court backlog isn't realistic. So I urge the Minister to be radical and to make sure that we ensure that offenders are punished and victims get their day in court.
Minister.
Well, I can hear that my honourable friend has taken the liberty of actually reading the report, because what he's identified is the central premise and argument that Sir Brian Leveson, one of our most distinguished judges, makes in the report, which is this: we cannot simply sit our way out of the crisis which we've inherited. We need to consider very carefully structural reform, once-in-a-generation structural reform. Of course, we've got to combine it with investment as well, something which this government is already doing with the 4,000 additional sitting days that we've added over and above what the previous government agreed. So he's absolutely right, investment plus reform.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister accept that changes to fundamental rights like trial by jury in one part of the United Kingdom could create serious divergence across jurisdictions and raise questions about equal access to justice for citizens in Northern Ireland? And what would her response be to that?
Minister.
Well, as she well knows, justice is a devolved matter, and it's right that decisions involving justice are taken at the correct level. But I want to assure her of this, and indeed the rest of the House. The state's obligation to provide a fair trial is paramount. And so whether, as is currently the case, one's case is heard in the magistrates without a jury, or whether, as for the most serious cases will continue to be the case, a case is heard but with a jury. The point is the state must deliver a fair trial, and therefore the question of equal access to justice simply will not arise.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, the Bar Council facilitated a very useful conversation with local barristers in the South West. I think they have some reservations, but I'll leave them to make representations. But one thing that they did say, which I would urge the Minister to feed into to ensure that in provisions of the second half, is around the efficiency of the forensic service and the transfer mechanism to bring prisoners into the courts. Because the delays and inefficiencies there and the contracts that are laid to set out those services can have a material impact on the efficiency of the court service. And I would urge the Minister to make sure that that is focused on, because I think that could make a massive impact. But I have grave concerns about where this is. But I'd finally say, as Chief Secretary, I, against advice, allowed Alex Chalk and his predecessor to make some capital to revenue switches in their budgets to deal with the urgency of this problem. And I hope that's helpful to her in her negotiations with the Treasury going forward.
Minister, good luck.
Well, look, I thank him for his typically helpful and constructive contribution. We're talking here about a system, and there are so many moving parts in that system, which is why we're not going to give an instant response to Sir Brian's review or indeed to some of the points he raises. But it's clear that we've got to get the whole system working. And in that vein, let me address our professions, our criminal bar, who do a sterling job. I too have engaged closely with the Bar Council, with the Criminal Bar Association. We need to do this in collaboration with them. This is going to be a team effort to rebuild our criminal justice system, and we will continue to engage over the summer as we bring together the necessary reforms to bring down the backlogs and deliver swifter justice for victims.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I sympathise with the Minister's frustration at the Tories' brass neck. There's clearly a crisis in the criminal justice system, and it's clearly of their making. But rather than undermine the jury system, we need to invest in our courts. Does the Minister agree? It's all about priorities. Are you going to use your limited budget to build more prisons and simply produce more prisoners, or actually use that limited money to invest in the criminal justice system and restorative justice?
Minister.
Well, as I've made clear, we are investing in those prison places. Only 500 prison places were added in 14 years under the previous government. We have committed money to building 14,000 new prison places, as well as comprehensive sentencing reform. We've also committed investment into our courts, whether that's court maintenance, whether it's additional funding for criminal legal aid, whether it's additional and now record Crown Court sitting days. We are going to make that investment, £450 million worth of it, in our courts. But as Sir Brian Leveson tells us, that is insufficient. Yep. That alone will not see the delays to those victims about whom we've heard so much today. It won't see those delays come down. We have got to do what it takes. So that necessitates investment, which we are already beginning to do, and reform.
Adnan Hussain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As a member of the Bar, I say this plainly. Removing the right to jury trials is a reckless constitutional shortcut. And as the Criminal Bar Association puts it, it is a reform, it's retreat. Does the Minister agree that the right to choose between a jury or judge-led trial must never be denied, and that the real solution lies in investing in the system we have and not dismantling the very foundations?
Minister.
Well, I respect him as a fellow member of the Bar, but I also respect the views of Sir Brian Leveson, of the Lord Chief Justice, previous former Lord Chief Justice, Sir Ian Burnett, and many august legal minds who themselves have done so much to preserve our fundamental constitutional principles. And what they understand is this: 90% of our current criminal trials don't happen with a jury. But what really is unfair and what really does undermine fundamental constitutional rights is a failure to deliver a timely trial. If you are asking victims of crime, or even those accused of a crime wrongly, to clear their name, to wait 2-3 years of their day in court, that, I believe, is a denial of a constitutional right.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank Sir Brian for his work and applaud all efforts to speed up the system. But what reassurance can the Minister give to my constituents who will see a reduction in access to jury trial as the beginning of a slippery edge to ever greater erosion of one of the fundamental liberties and glories of this country?
Minister.
Well, today we're not setting out our policy response to the specific recommendations in Sir Brian's review. What we are recognising is his central thesis, which is at the moment the victims in your constituency are being thoroughly let down by the delays that were allowed to accrue by your own party. And with that in mind, it's clear that what we have to do is make the record investment that we are making, continue to make that investment, but combine it with structural reform, a package of reforms which will drive both efficiency but also fundamentally deliver that swifter justice for victims, which actually I believe we all wish to see.
Caroline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I share concerns about delays to justice. No rape victim should ever have to wait 5 years for their day in court, but I am seriously concerned about limiting trial by jury and how that could dent confidence. So I ask the Minister, as you look at these reforms over the summer, please will you consider more serious investment in rehabilitation and resettlement work? The Landworks project in my constituency has a reoffending rate of 5%. If we could roll out this type of work, we would reduce crime, which would relieve backlog on the courts, and then everyone could have their day in court more quickly.
Minister.
The holistic type of support, the preventative interventions that she describes are exactly the sort of provision that we are looking at in combination with the sort of investment and structural reforms that will be needed here. And I know that my colleague in the other place, the Prisons Minister, is taking on board precisely that sort of package of rehabilitation models so that we can break this endless cycle of reoffending.
Nick Timmons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This weekend, the Prime Minister rather pathetically told the BBC he was a hard bastard, and I think members of the public would find it surprising that letting criminals out of prison early is a way of showing that he is. The Minister not unreasonably said she wants to have time to consider Sir Brian's recommendations, but it is the case that some things are clear-cut. So can she take this opportunity to just rule out reducing sentences by 40% for criminals who plead guilty?
Minister.
Well, I think the Prime Minister probably is a hard bastard, and I think that we are tough on this side of the House on law and order. It's why we would never allow what the party opposite allowed to happen, which is running our prisons to the brink of collapse, because it's that. It's the fact that at the point at which we inherited the prison system, there was simply not enough places to lock up some of the most serious and dangerous criminals who perpetrated crimes in this country. It's absolutely scandalous. What we're going to do, as he rightly points out, is do the serious business of developing policy and of government. And so we are going to consider the detailed policy recommendations. Of course, we've got to consider how they interact with David Gauke's recommendations. It's got to be knitted together. It's got to be appropriate to deliver swifter justice for victims and to protect the public.
Rupert Lowe, are you on the right?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The jury trial has been embedded deeply into the British psyche and indeed into our constitution, really since Henry II, who introduced the jury trial to fairly deal with land disputes. Indeed, it's embedded into the US Constitution through the Sixth Amendment. And it's embedded there to protect against biased judges, oppressive prosecutions, and it's there to safeguard individual liberties. I have severe doubts about our judiciary at the moment. I'm not sure they're going in the right direction. And when I read the adult court bench book, it gives me even greater concerns. The jury trial is already under threat, as you probably know, in defamation cases. So I have three questions. Why does the government appear to be so terrified of decent British people sitting on juries? Are the government intent on further undermining the jury trial? And if they are, in any way, will they please undertake to have a full debate in this House before it happens?
Minister.
Well, first of all, if you'd heard my earlier answers, I made clear that the jury trial will remain a cornerstone of British justice for the most serious cases. Sir Brian Leveson, in his review, talks about whether it's appropriate and proportionate to have a jury trial, for example, in some of the most complex fraud cases. He also considers whether it's proportionate in cases where, say, for example, someone steals a bottle of whiskey. Is it appropriate to have a full jury trial with all the cost, expense and delay, which means that somebody who perhaps is a victim of rape is waiting 2-3 years for their day in court and means that that day will never come. But what I can undertake, as I said in opening, is that when we are ready with our package of reforms and response to this review, we will return to this House and a full debate can be had.
Richard Hall.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The jury system is essential to protect us against oppressive judges, malicious individuals, sometimes malicious police officers, or even governments. The Minister speaks of the most serious cases, but isn't it the case, actually, that the most serious impact on individuals can be not from necessarily what she may regard as the most serious cases, but any case which goes to court, because the impact on the individual can totally change the course of someone's life, even if the charge perhaps isn't as serious as she might consider it to be, because the impact it can have can be devastating on their family life, on their career, or all other aspects of a person's future.
Minister.
Well, as he knows, and as I said earlier, 90% of cases in this country already happen without a jury. No one says that that is not delivering justice of the highest robustness and integrity. And indeed, I'll pick him up on his comment, and indeed earlier comments, denigrating the integrity and independence of our judiciary. You won't hear that sort of criticism from this side of the House. No. Our judiciary is in fact one of the prides of this country. It's actually why people so respect the rule of law, why the UK is such a great place to do business. I won't talk the judiciary down. We need them, we respect them, and on this side of the House we'll adhere to that.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Justice Secretary talks about the need to expedite trials for the sake of victims of crime, and she is absolutely right. As she considers these proposals from Sir Brian Leveson, will she also take into account those who are innocent, who stand wrongly accused and who are having to wait anxious years for their day in court?
Minister.
He makes a very, very good point, which is that whilst our focus is on victims of crime who are waiting, some cases, years for their day in court, on the other side of the coin, those defendants accused of a crime, perhaps wrongly, waiting to clear their name, that can have a devastating effect. It's really what he describes is the human impact of the delays that have accrued as a result of the backlogs which we inherited from the party opposite.
Welcome.
Mr. Speaker, as a barrister working in criminal courts, I've often addressed the jury in closing speeches by saying, members of the jury, we have the best legal system in the world. And it's the best because you make it that. You bring your wisdom, you bring your life experiences, your common sense, and you apply it to the facts in this case. And before you decide a verdict of guilty, bear in mind that if you or a member of your family was sat in that box, in that defendant's seat, you would need to be sure before you return that verdict of guilty. Because as a peer, that's an obligation upon you. Now, I get the Minister's point that justice delayed is justice denied. But equally, Mr. Speaker, there is the principle of justice must not only be done, but it must be seen to be done. And where we have Sir Brian Leveson given a basic mandate that we need to speed up jury trials or get a result, that's just going to eliminate the very fundamental principles and cornerstone of our legal system. Does the Minister agree with that?
The jury trial, as I've said, will remain a cornerstone, a pillar of our justice system for the most serious cases. But what Sir Brian Leveson tells us in his report, in the opening pages, is that the current system is broken and he uses the word essential. He says reform of the system will be essential because whilst we rightly take pride in the principles that underpin our criminal justice system, the fact is, at the moment, it simply is not working. It's letting down those whom it's intended to serve and those who serve within the system. We've got to fix that, and that's why we will take our time and then we will act on the programme of reforms that Sir Brian Leveson has recommended today.
Jim Allister.
Speaker, in Northern Ireland, for over 50 years, we have had judge-only trials in terrorist cases, probably for understandable reasons. All non-terrorist cases have been jury trials. In my professional life, at the bar, both the junior and the senior bar, I have practiced before all those courts. And the experience that that gives confirms to me very firmly the belief that public confidence is most attainable when we have jury trials. Irrespective of how cautious, of how diligent a judge is, judges can get case hardened. And that is the source of why public confidence rests most in the jury system. And therefore, would the Minister agree that the key determinant here in retaining jury trial is whether the offence is an indictable offence or not? And if it's an indictable offence, then the first port of call must be a jury trial.
Minister. Well, I respect his wealth of experience before our different sorts of court, but I also respect the wealth of experience that Sir Brian Leveson has brought to bear in his review, and what he identifies is that whilst for certain cases a jury trial will always be appropriate, not least for the reasons that the Honourable Gentleman has outlined, we have to take a proportionate response, because if we are offering up jury trials to all sorts of cases, it means that certain victims and indeed defendants are having to wait far too long for their day in court. And as it stands, the vast majority, 90% of criminal trials in this country already happen without a jury. It's why we have to consider very carefully where to draw the line. That's what the government will be doing this summer.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady is held in the highest esteem by us all in this chamber from both sides, and that's never in doubt in relation to where we are with this question today. The British justice system is the envy of justice systems across the whole of the... Indeed, it probably set the example for the rest of the justice systems that there is. So I pose a question, if I can, Minister, with the utmost respect, if I can ask you this question, please. The Minister will understand the reluctance of any member in this House to restrict the right to a jury of your peers, and the movement of justice from a multi-person jury to a one-person jury. Does the Minister not believe that we must look at extending court days and the other interim measures rather than changing the course of justice which has served well and which most democracies base their very justice system on? Thanks so much.
Minister.
Well, he will know that the respect felt across this House and by myself is absolutely reciprocated, and it's why we have taken on the challenge, rather than sit idly by, of increasing investment in a record number of Crown Court sitting days, 4,000 additional sitting days above the level agreed by the previous government, increased investment in our criminal legal aid system to build capacity to man all these additional trials to meet the demands coming into the system. But the clear lesson from Sir Brian's report, the key conclusion that he has delivered today and which we will take firmly on board, is that continuing to try to sit our way out of the crisis is not sufficient. Essential, then, is that we do reform as well, and we will take the time necessary to consider what that looks like.
That concludes the urgent question. Point of order, Saoirse Eastwood.
On a point of order, Madam Deputy Speaker, ministers will be aware that I have raised concerns about the treatment and detention of Lee Stinton, a British national and son of Elaine and Edward Stinton, my constituents in Lagan Valley. He was detained by US Immigration and Customs Enforcement while travelling to work in Key West, Florida. He has built a life there for himself. Now this has all come to an end in the most awful of circumstances in Crone Detention Centre. I am grateful for the support offered to date by the FCDO. Are you aware of ministers seeking to make a statement on this matter? Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I am grateful for notice of that point of order, but I have not been made aware of any request for a statement. The honourable member has put her concerns on the record. We now move to the 10-minute rule motion. Chris Blaw.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require schools to maintain an allergy management policy, to require schools to hold a supply of adrenaline auto-injections for treating allergic reactions and anaphylactics, to require allergy training for staff in schools and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the Minister for being in his place and his constant dialogue on this issue. But as he knows, I am not the first to raise the inadequacies of our current laws on protecting children with allergies in our schools. Many honourable members across this House have spoken on the issue, yet horrific incidents and countless near misses continue. Allergies are something many of us have experience of. 1 in 3 people in the UK now lives with an allergic disease. Hospital admissions for allergic reactions have risen by 160% in the past 20 years, and 50% of children are now affected by at least one allergic condition. Every year, approximately 43,000 new cases of childhood allergies require care. Studies show that the incidence of food allergies in England nearly doubled between 2008 and 2018, with a prevalence of 4% among preschool children. At school, food allergies affects around 2 children in every classroom. Children spend a significant time of their lives at school, and 80% of food allergy reactions happen there, including a quarter of first-time anaphylactic reactions. Many children who have had prior severe reactions are not prescribed their auto-injector, and many first-time reactions occur at school. So reliance solely on children carrying pre-prepared medication is dangerous. With an ever-growing number of children requiring allergy care, it has never been more vital that the place we entrust with our children, the school, where we drop them off every day, is a safe and secure environment. But too often, it isn't. Madam Deputy Speaker, I cannot comprehend the pain that some families have had to endure because they have lost a child. That is a grief as a father that I can't ever hope to experience. But I do know that when current guidance and legislation allows a patchwork of different standards in our schools, we can and must do better. There is a glaring lack of consistency across schools in the UK regarding allergy management. There's a 50-50 chance that a school that your child goes to would have a spare adrenaline auto-injector pen available. There's a 55% chance that no training has been provided to staff on managing allergies in school or on trips, and a 1 in 4 chance that staff have had no training on how to identify allergy symptoms or what to do in an emergency. Furthermore, there is a 1 in 6 chance that a school does not have an individual healthcare plan for pupils with allergies, and a 1 in 3 chance that a school does not have an allergy policy at all. A 1 in 3 chance also exists that near misses of allergy incidents are not recorded anywhere. With the prevalence of allergies rising and a steep increase in hospitalisations due to allergic reactions, we must act to change this unacceptable status quo. School staff deserve to know how to prevent allergic reactions and be prepared to manage them if then a horrendous incident occurred. Children deserve to learn in a safe and inclusive environment, and parents deserve the confidence to send their children to school knowing that adequate measures are in place. The School Allergy Safety Bill would require all schools to have an allergy policy in place. Currently, 70% of schools lack basic protections, and 1 in 3 schools have no allergy policy in place. Introducing these policies would create a whole school approach to allergy safety, making it everyone's responsibility to embed good allergy practices and know their role in protecting children. This would include how to manage allergies on a day-to-day basis in classrooms, playgrounds and dining rooms, ensuring that children with allergies are not excluded but supported in an inclusive school environment. Madam Deputy Speaker, without these policies, children with allergies often miss out on opportunities. The Natasha Allergy Research Foundation found that 70% of parents reported their allergic child had missed school due to their allergy, sometimes driven by anxiety. Children should never miss learning opportunities out of fear, and this bill can help change that. Alongside allergy policies, the bill requires allergy training for school staff, enabling them to create a safe environment. Research from NASWT and the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation shows 7% of school staff have not received any allergy awareness training. The bill would provide guidance on adapting classroom practices to reduce risk, ensuring safe and inclusive activities, understanding the mental health impacts of food allergies, and how to respond in those emergencies. The bill also mandates that schools carry spare adrenaline auto-injectors so that if a reaction occurs, staff have both the medication and training to take swift action. When every second counts, this simple step could be life-saving. Auto-injectors should be treated like defibrillators. They should be accessible and accompanied by a trained member of the staff. Although there are examples of good practice without a national framework, it is a postcode lottery whether a child will attend a school with adequate training, policies, and vital medication. This inequality leads to missed school days, unnecessary emergency visits, bullying, and lower attainment. Providing spare pens, training, and policies to every school removes that lottery. Safety should not depend on a child's location or their family's income. Current legislation is insufficient. Schools in England follow statutory guidance such as supporting pupils with medical conditions at school and the early years foundation stage, but neither explicitly mandates safeguards for pupils with allergies. The Benedict Blythe Foundation highlights that this lack of clear expectation leads to wide variations in allergy safety across this country. Madam Deputy Speaker, the 3 pillars of this bill, staff training, allergy policies, and spare adrenaline auto-injectors, can save lives. These recommendations come from coroner's reports after tragic incidents. We must learn and fill these gaps to create a fairer, safer school experience for all children. Too many teachers lack the knowledge they need, don't have the support they deserve, and too many children with allergies are still not offered a safe, fit-for-purpose environment to learn. I hope today, after an awful lot of talking, we can get on with the doing.
Yeah. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Tahir Ali, Sarah Coombs, Kat Eccles, Sarah Edwards, Amanda Pack, Becky Gittins, Jodie Goslin, Lee Ingham, Alicia Kearns, Dave Robertson, Gareth Snell MP, sorry, and myself.
Chris Blaw.